Senhoras e senhores, muito bom dia. A partir deste momento, nós estamos iniciando os trabalhos do 17º Seminário Nacional de Bibliotecas Universitárias, uma realização da Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do Sul com a Comissão Brasileira de Bibliotecas Universitárias. Solicitamos a todos, por gentileza, que desliguem ou coloquem no modo silencioso seus aparelhos celulares durante as atividades neste auditório. Este evento tem como tema central a biblioteca universitária como laboratório na sociedade de informação. Desde 1978, o SNBU vem promovendo o encontro e estreitando laços entre os profissionais que atuam nas bibliotecas universitárias brasileiras, alcançando um nível de maturidade que o converteu no maior e mais importante evento na área da ciência da informação no campo acadêmico. O objetivo do seminário é o de refletir sobre a biblioteca universitária como laboratório de ensino voltado para o desenvolvimento de competências informacionais e de pesquisa, atuante na identificação e no acesso às informações necessárias para a formação profissional e o avanço do conhecimento técnico e científico. Queremos, desde já, fazer um agradecimento especial a todos os patrocinadores do seminário: Patrocínio Ouro, .lib, Elsevier, Systems Link International, Patrocínio Prata, Bicateca Soluções para Educação, Sungage Learning, EBSCO e Minha Biblioteca. Patrocínio Bronze, Springer e Vértice Books. Também agradecemos aos nossos apoiadores, CAPES, CNPq, FAPERGS, Secretaria de Cultura de Gramado e Convention Bureau Gramado Canela. Iniciamos este dia de trabalhos com o eixo temático Construção e Comunicação da Informação. Teremos agora a conferência com o tema E-books, Bibliotecas Universitárias e o Mercado Editorial. Convidamos para compor a mesa, como coordenadora desta atividade, a senhora Bianca Amaro, coordenadora do Laboratório de Metodologias de Tratamento e Disseminação da Informação do Instituto Brasileiro de Informação em Ciência e Tecnologia. Como relatora da atividade, a senhora Rosa Maria Vivona Bertolini Oliveira, diretora do Sistema de Bibliotecas e Informação na Pontifícia Universidade Católica de Campinas. E a nossa conferencista, a senhora Sue Polanca, dos Estados Unidos. Sue Polanca é bacharel em Artes, Comunicação e Marketing pela Universidade de Dayton e mestre em Biblioteconomia pela Kent State University. É criadora do premiado blog No Shelf Required sobre as questões que envolvem e-books para bibliotecários e editores. Sue é referência nas bibliotecas Wright State University, em Dayton, e presidente eleita da Associação Biblioteca Acadêmica de Ohio. Foi nomeada no ano de 2011 pelo Library Journal por seu trabalho com e-books, além de ser membro recém-eleito do Conselho ALA. Sua coluna, Off the Shelf, é referência eletrônica e aparece em Booklist trimestralmente. Com a palavra, para a condução dos trabalhos, a senhora Bianca Amaro.
Bom dia a todos. Primeiramente, eu gostaria de agradecer a presença de todos, assim como o convite para coordenar essa mesa. Inicialmente, eu gostaria de dar alguns avisos de caráter organizacional, que são os seguintes. A apresentação terá a duração de 1 hora e, após essa apresentação, teremos um intervalo de 10 minutos para perguntas. As perguntas poderão ser feitas por escrito ou através dos microfones que estarão disponíveis com as recepcionistas. Eu considero que muito oportuno nós iniciarmos o congresso com uma palestra com essa temática, porque acredito que vimos tratando, ao longo dos últimos anos, de uma maneira especial, toda a questão relacionada com os periódicos eletrônicos. Nos faltava agora ter um pouquinho mais de atenção em relação aos livros eletrônicos. Acredito que é o próximo passo que temos que dar, temos que focar um pouco mais nessa questão e ver como tratá-la dentro do âmbito das nossas bibliotecas. E considerando também, e a segunda parte da nossa conferência do dia de hoje, também a questão dos periódicos eletrônicos, principalmente relacionados com a questão do acesso aberto. Então, acredito que a sessão de hoje é uma sessão muito feliz. Iniciar os trabalhos discutindo a questão dos e-books é muito interessante para a gente. Só temos a ganhar, e principalmente com a presença da professora Supolanka, que vai nos dar uma visão geral a respeito da temática. Nesse sentido, eu, para não me alongar, passo a palavra para a doutora Supolanka.
Bom dia. Tudo bem? Thank you. Obrigada por me convidar para falar hoje na bela cidade de Gramado. É uma honra e prazer estar aqui. That is all the Portuguese I know. So thank you to my interpreters. So today I'm going to talk with you about ebooks in the academic library. We have a lot to cover because there's so much to talk about with this issue, and I look forward to your questions later. If you tweet, I don't know if you're all tweeters, but my handle is no shelf required. So today I wanted to start by giving you just some basic statistics about ebooks in the United States and academic libraries, just to kind of show you where we are. And then I'm going to focus quite a bit on how we're purchasing and acquiring ebooks, talking about various business models. And I wanted to highlight a couple of them that have to do with patron-driven acquisition and some that focus just on access rather than ownership. And talk about locally owning and hosting your ebooks, which is very different than relying on a vendor interface. I'll wrap things up with a discussion of how ebooks, many of them are open access and where you can find some of these, and then talk about issues relating to self-publishing and what that might mean for us in the future. So the Library Journal did a survey over the last 3 years of academic libraries to find out exactly how many of us are offering ebooks. And in 2010, 94% of U.S. academic libraries were offering ebooks to their users. We didn't have a huge amount to grow to get to 100, so the last 2 years we're around 95%. So that's nearly every U.S. academic library is offering some kind of electronic books. There are estimates that by the year 2020, 80% of our collection budgets will go towards electronic content. If you look at the chart here, you'll see the blue lines, which are declining. The blue indicates how much money we're spending on print materials. Obviously, the green going the opposite way shows how much money we're spending on electronic materials, and that includes books and journals. What's interesting is if you put a couple of red lines across to see where we cross over, and it looks like around 2009, 2010 was the time when we're going to now start moving pretty much towards electronic content. So how are we buying these? Let me start by asking you a question. How many of you are involved with daily or weekly actual purchasing of electronic books? So just a few. Okay, great. Are any of you working on larger group packages where you might be negotiating directly with vendors to access electronic books? Okay. So the first rule that I always talk about when buying ebooks is you're no longer just buying content. When you would buy a print book, you could walk into a bookstore, you could contact your vendor, you could hand them the money, walk out with a book, and if you never spoke to them, never saw them again, it was okay. You didn't need them anymore because you had what you wanted. But now it's different. You're purchasing content inside of a container. So no, you're buying the content, you're buying any software that's included with it, you're having to choose a business model, you're establishing an ongoing relationship with a vendor, and whether you like it or not, you're also purchasing DRM, Digital Rights Management. All of this to be able to access your electronic content. So no longer can we just pay our money and walk away. We have to continue these relationships because our content may not reside in our physical walls or within our own servers, so we have to maintain these ongoing relationships with vendors, which is very important. Another question that I ask libraries when they ask for my advice on purchasing ebooks, and the question I've begun to start asking them is, what's your main goal? What is your objective? Do you want to build the most comprehensive research collection for the long term? Or do you want to use your collection funds more effectively to access content that is needed right now? And depending on which one of these you choose, you may go about purchasing ebooks completely differently. Many people will make this decision perhaps based on a discipline. Perhaps they want to build a collection in the humanities, but perhaps they want to just access materials in the sciences and technology areas. Often the content you want determines automatically the vendor you're going to have to go to, the business model you will have to use, the license you will have to sign, and the format that the content is available in. And this really strikes home in the US with our public libraries who would like the popular fiction materials. They really only have one business model with which they can buy that content. There are very limited vendors and many, many restrictions. With academic content, luckily we have more options. The best business model out there is free, of course, and there are many places where you can go for free ebooks. But there are others. Generally, we focus on perpetual access in the US, and that would be you pay a fee so that you may have ongoing access to the content. I hesitate to say that you're buying the content or owning the content because in many cases you don't. You are buying ongoing access, and there may or there may not be an annual fee that you have to pay to keep that access going. Within that perpetual access, there are different ways of choosing what books you want. It may be that you, the librarians, make all of the choices, but there are some models now in the US that are really, really catching on in popularity where patrons are making the final decision on what content is purchased. And I'll talk about that in a lot more detail later. I know a lot of you are probably accessing ebooks through subscriptions, and many of us do too. And this is kind of where we draw that line from building to accessing, because as you know, if you don't pay your annual subscription, you lose access to all of your content. And short-term loans, which is part of that patron-driven model, is even shorter, and it really involves just access or pay per use. One of the free collections I wanted to make sure you knew about is something sponsored by the Internet Archive. And this is a very prominent organization in the US that makes available books and videos and music and archives of the Internet for a variety of things. And they have many, many public domain titles. These are titles that are no longer in copyright. They're primarily English language and primarily the classic literature, older materials. And they have much of this available, but they also have a new service called In-Library Lending. It's an international service. It is a group that you can join free of cost. You just need to send them a print book And in exchange for sending them a print book, they will allow you to access this collection of about 100,000 ebooks. And they're not very, very old books. They might be things that are 10 or 15 or 20 years old. And they allow you access to those one user at a time. So you'll be able to link to it from your website. You can also bring the records into your online catalog or into your discovery tools, and they will allow you to go and find the book and download it or read it online. So that might be something that you want to look into for free collections if you're interested in English language materials. There's also another huge variety of sites out there that do offer the free materials, and again, the ones that I have written on the screen, many are English language, and many will have overlapping content because there are only so many things in the public domain, which is primarily what these are. The screenshot I have up there is one here from in Brazil, and I didn't jot it down, and now I'm regretting that because I cannot read the small print on the display there, so I apologize for that. So patron-driven acquisition is a business model that really started in the US back in 1999 when NetLibrary first started. And it's a business model that was brought to NetLibrary from a group of Colorado libraries. Ebooks were brand new. NetLibrary was trying to sell them. And the academic libraries in Colorado said, we're unsure about this. We're not sure we want to take this step yet. What guarantees can we get that this content will actually be used? And so together they worked with NetLibrary to develop this business model where the patrons made the final decision on what books were purchased based on use. When the model first started, it was very clunky and you used it, you bought it, and your money was gone quickly. And so many people didn't want to use it because their budgets were just gone and it wasn't successful. Well, in the last 5 or 6 years, they've made some huge developments in this business model, and it's much more manageable now, and it's being offered by most of the ebook aggregators that serve the US. Like EBSCO offers it, eBrary, EBL, others that you may be purchasing from. Some individual publishers are also offering the model. Basically how this works is you're still involved. You work with the vendor to set aside a collection of books, an approval plan, we would call it, and we'd say, books by this publisher, in this price range, in these topics, in these disciplines, and you get together a group of books that meets the criteria of your library. You get brief MARC records or brief catalog records to put in your catalog. You don't pay for anything yet. Instead, you negotiate with the vendor for what you will pay and when you will pay it. Then when your users come along and they're searching your discovery tool or your online catalog and they find this book and they say, I want that book. And as soon as they use it for a certain amount of time, maybe 10 minutes, or perhaps they copy and paste from it, maybe they print some pages from it, maybe they try and download chapters or the entire book. As soon as one of these trigger events happens, that is when you actually exchange money with the vendor to buy the book. You can put various restrictions, like don't purchase books that are above this cost. You can designate a certain amount of money, and as soon as that amount of money is gone, you stop buying anything else. And you can also mediate this where the title is not purchased unless you're notified and you give approval. I don't like the mediated part because it defeats the purpose of providing just-in-time content to the patron. But many libraries do like to use that as a security measure. There's a book about patron-driven acquisition. It's out right now. It's from De Gruyter. I wrote a chapter in it about business models, but it really gives a lot of pros and cons and the nitty-gritty details of this model. It is being tested with consortia or with library groups, and it's working so far. Not to say without complication, but it's working. When you negotiate with the vendor in this patron-driven, you negotiate, I'm going to buy the book, or maybe I'm not going to buy the book just yet. You can say, I want to buy it perpetually, or maybe I just want to short-term loan it. I would call this too like a pay-per-use. Perhaps you want to say, the first time a patron finds this book, I want to just borrow it for 7 days, for 30 days, for 1 day, for 10 days. And you determine up front with the vendor the amount of time, perhaps, and whether you want the loan first. If you go this route with the short-term loan, when a use is triggered, when a patron wants it, and when they've chosen the amount of time they want it for, a price is then given. It's generally a portion of the list price. So if that book would cost $100 in the US, perhaps you'll pay $10 to let that one patron use it. This is what I refer to when I'm saying you're paying for access. Instead of spending $100 to get that book to have ongoing perpetual access, you're only going to pay $10, and you're going to use it. But only you're going to use it, and when you're finished, it's gone. Many, many libraries are going this route in the US. Many academic libraries are, for a variety of reasons. They're doing many studies on the effective use of their collection budgets. And they're finding that many times these books are only used once. Many times they're only used twice, even 4 times. Again, if we look at that $100, if you've only used the book 4 times, you've only invested $40. You still haven't bought the whole thing. If they're finding that it gets used a lot, you can negotiate with the vendor to say, on the 3rd loan, go ahead and purchase the book. As I said, there's a variety of libraries trying this. If you would like to know them or to know where their studies are, just let me know and I'll be happy to share that with you. One thing that I will say, that many publishers are using, they're willing to work with this model, but you will find some that are not willing. And when you think about it from the publisher side, they're publishing 1,000 titles this year, and they have no guarantee that anyone's going to buy them based on patron use. So that's difficult. It's a difficult decision for them to make, as it's a gamble. Are the libraries, are the users really going to use it? And if not, then I'm stuck with all this content that I can't sell. Many of the academic libraries are using this for an interlibrary loan alternative. Remember when I said you can pay, the $10 per use? They're weighing the cost of that against what is it going to cost to interlibrary loan a print copy of this book from another school, where you have shipping costs involved, where you have time involved, staff time involved, and they're finding that the short-term loans are cheaper. And so many of them are just using it for that purpose. I created this chart to kind of put into perspective the access levels of ebooks, to show you where you have more control, where you have less control. If you look on the far left of the chart, you'll see that the lock is open. These are ebooks that are, completely open. They're in the public domain. Anybody can access them anytime. There are no restrictions. You can all look at it. You can all download it. No payment required. Obviously, this is a great place for libraries to be, but it's not logical, because that's not where the brand new content is that we need. As you move to the right, then, you see that the line rises. It's rising because your level of control, or the DRM that's put on that content, there's more of it. So the further you move to the right, the less control you have, the higher the risk you have of ongoing access to that content. Right in the middle, that big chunk that says perpetual access, that's where most US academic libraries are. We're somewhere in that middle area buying books perpetually. But those libraries that I said are really testing with that access versus the building, they're going to be on the far right. They're going to be doing subscriptions, short-term loans, pay-per-use, where there's no ongoing ownership at all. And it's very high risk, very high with the DRM. So when you're looking at content, think about my chart here and decide, where do you want your library to be? Where do you want your consortia to be? And maybe it's by discipline. Where do I want the humanities to be? Where do I want the nursing and the medical titles to be? And there are reasons, of course, for just doing subscriptions or short-term loans for content that has high turnover and is out of date quick. Are all of you in a consortia? Can I see a show of hands if you're in a consortia where you buy books as a group? I'm in one too. My consortia is called Ohio Link, and there's 90 of us, academic libraries, and we pool our money to buy resources, and it's a great thing. We like to buy ebooks as a group for a variety of reasons. First of all, we can get more content for the same money or perhaps less money, as you know, versus buying it individually. The thing that I like about it is you're able to offer a consistent level of content across a wide group of schools. And let me give you an example here. I have in my consortia the Ohio State University with 50,000 students. I also have in my consortia the Athenaeum of Ohio, which has 150 students studying theology. When we pool our money together, this school that serves 150 students pays less than Ohio State over here with 50,000 students who pays a lot more. When we all put our money in proportionately, we all get the same content. So that means these 150 students not only have the theology titles, they have all the science, technology, math, medicine, everything that they might want. So it's a great way to offer the same consistent content across a wide group of libraries. You'll probably find, if you haven't already, that when you buy ebooks, many times you may not share them. You may not loan them via interlibrary loan. So if you buy them as a group, it does allow you to share content amongst that group. It still doesn't allow interlibrary loan, but it's one step closer to being able to do that. Oftentimes, the vendors will provide volume discounts when you purchase for that large of a group. And another benefit is you just have to negotiate one license. You know, what if you were all in the same consortia and we had Nicholas negotiate the license for you? He's going to do all the work and he's going to sign it all for you, and you're going to pay him nicely, right, Nicholas? But then he's going to do all the work and you don't have to. So that's a great benefit to that. So you can centralize all of that work, assuming, of course, you have someone central who can do it for you. There are some negative aspects, though, of buying as a group. As I said before, with the patron-driven, sometimes publishers don't want to sell content to large groups. I mean, think about the economics of that for them. If I have a book and I would like to sell it to all of you, I could sell 1,000 copies to each of, individually. But if you group together and pool your money, I may only sell 10 or 20 or maybe 30 copies. Simple economics, which one would you prefer? So there are publishers that won't sell to groups of libraries. I've found in my consortia it's an extremely long process, and it's a difficult one. Each individual library, you give up some control here. You give up choice in the publishers you're going to buy from. You give up choice in the specific titles you might want. You give up choice in the platform that you might host these books on. So you lose some of that control, but in the end you gain hopefully more content and the ability to share it among the group. Because of that, your group needs to do a lot of negotiating within the group. Well, what content do we want? What platform do we want to put it on? How many titles are we going to buy? And it's a long and painful process. In my Ohio Link consortia, we've been working on this for over 2 years, and we've still not quite got it. So it's not the negotiating with the publishers that's difficult for us. It's as 90 libraries trying to decide what's best for us. Sometimes it's difficult to negotiate prices. And many vendors may say, I'll give you all, if you volume purchase, I'll give you all a discount, but you all still have to buy your own copy. And I give an example of this as a restaurant. We would call them in the US a cafeteria, where you walk in with a tray and you pick the kind of food that you want to eat, so like a buffet. So you can all go to the restaurant, you can all get your own tray, and you walk through the line and you pick the items that you want for your tray. But in the end, when you go to pay, you pay for what is on your tray. That is all you have access to, but we'll give you a discount because you all came to the same restaurant and you all ate together. So that's, I would call it a cafeteria plan in the US. So there are some positives and negatives of buying as a group. Another thing that's happening with some US libraries, they're getting kind of frustrated with the DRM. They're getting frustrated with lack of control of their content, and they're getting frustrated with a variety of things that have to do with library-vendor relationships. And so they're trying to host their own ebook content. There are 4 consortia groups or libraries in the US that I'm aware of that are doing this, and one of them is my consortia, OhioLink. Actually, I shouldn't say US, the Scholars Portal is actually in Canada. So the 2 on the left are academic libraries, the 2 on the right are public libraries, and they're working directly with publishers to purchase the files, bring the files to the library on our own server to deliver them to our patrons. So if we look back at my chart, we're on the left side here where it says locally hosting. So looking in the long term, we have more control of our content. We are building a collection here versus accessing. So why would you want to do this? You can purchase the content files direct from the publisher, as I said, and then you have control of those files. Oftentimes you can negotiate a discount for this. An example with the OhioLink Consortia, we will go to a publisher and we will say, I want your entire front list. What are you going to publish in 2012, 2013, and 2014? I want to buy all of it. And we'll negotiate a price, and we'll try to buy those files and bring the files to our server. What we've just done now is we've made ourselves an aggregator. We have become the EBSCO. We've become the eBrayer. We've become the EBL. We are hosting the books. We are delivering them through an interface. We have just put a lot of work on ourselves, which we'll get to on the negative side. So it does allow us, though, to develop an interface how we want it. We can work with our users to find out what's working, what's not working, what features do they want to be able to use with their ebooks, and we can deliver that to them. It's a way to guarantee preservation to to have ongoing access to the content. That preservation is a very tricky thing right now. How do you know when you buy an ebook right now that you will have it in 50 years? There is no guarantee right now that it may or may not be there. You'll have to check the license agreement to see what the publisher or what the aggregator is doing to guarantee you guarantee the content in the future. If you have control of the files, it's up to you to make sure that they're available and make sure the files are updated as time goes on. Oftentimes, when you purchase these files, you can purchase them without DRM, and that's what my group is doing. We work with the publishers, we negotiate the right price, we get the files. There is no DRM. My users still have to log in, so they have to authenticate so they can get to the content, so it's only my users that get it. But once they're in there, they can use it as much as they want. They can download it, the whole book, just chapters of the book if they want. They can print things. All of them, everybody, all 700,000 users could go to that book at the same time and use it. There are no restrictions like that, but we had to negotiate that in advance, and we probably paid for it too in advance. Some of the reasons you don't want to do this, it takes an enormous amount of staff time and money, and you need a lot of technology, you need servers, you need people that can program this, you need people that can work with the publishers. The publishers are going to send you their files in a variety of formats. Somehow you have to figure out a way to ingest those files, get them into your interface, make them available, get the catalog records into the catalog. There's a lot of work that has to be done on our side. And like we're very busy and we don't have a huge amount of time for that. So you may have to invest in the staff to do that. At midnight on a Sunday when the server crashes, we can't call EBSCO or EBL or eBrary or someone else. We have to take care of it ourselves. And we had a huge problem with that with my group about, I guess it was about 3 or 4 years ago. We've been hosting our own journal content since, I think, the late 90s. We have 15 million journal articles in our own interface, and it crashed. And it was down for a month. It was not good. Users weren't happy. Faculty weren't happy. And so it was difficult for us to be able to get out of that. We had to negotiate with the publishers to say, please let us come and access through your site too. And they were very gracious and allowed us to do that. So a lot of cost, a lot of time, a lot of staff, and again, not all publishers are going to be willing to sell files directly to you. Your only option may be to have it on their site. Since I've mentioned my consortia so much, I wanted to just briefly tell you about it. There are 91 of us, academic libraries. We have combined about 700,000 users, that's students and faculty. Our history of buying ebooks, we were one of the first groups that did buy from NetLibrary, and we did use patron-driven acquisition back in the year 2000, and we zipped through our money in no time flat. And we spent it all, and we found ourselves with all of this content that may or may not have been used ever again, but we owned it. We still own it. In 2000, 2001, we started to negotiate with the publishers to buy the content direct and to locally host it. We have about 41,000 titles right now that we locally host on our own server. We use open source software called XTF. It's not the greatest. Our interface needs a lot of work. You currently cannot download a whole book to a device. There's many things it just can't do. The publisher platforms are much, much more sophisticated. But we own the files. All the reasons before, self-preservation, ownership, having control of that content without DRM, that's what we were after. Our principles for our group when we go about buying the content, there are 3 things we look for. We want unlimited use of the content by any, unlimited simultaneous users, meaning all of you could get to the content at the same time. We want to be able to share the content across our group, and we want unlimited lifetime use. Those are the 3 things that we negotiate for. And yes, we will pay a premium for that, but by the time you figure in 90 libraries contributing and you work with the vendors, in the end, it's much more economical for us, and I'll show you that in a second. Just to give you an example of how our ebooks are being used, for one fiscal year, 2010 through 2011, we had over 25,000 titles loaded in that particular year from the publishers listed there, so ABC, Clio, Gale, Oxford, Sage, and Springer, so some very well-known publishers are working with us. 4% of those titles were not used. So 96% of the titles we bought got use. We had 1.4 million downloads on our own server and over 500,000 downloads on the publisher sites because we negotiated to have dual access at our own site and the publisher site. We are going about buying ebooks now in a slightly different way. Ideally, that's what we want, but we're finding sometimes we can't get that. So we are now using our agent, YBP, Yankee Book Peddler. They are the agent for all of the Ohio libraries, and that's how we buy our print materials. So we're now working with them to buy our ebooks as well, hopefully for shared access. And we're going to do a couple things with them. They're going to identify for us 10 or 20 publishers where we have the history of buying a high percentage of their titles. They're going to negotiate on our behalf with the publisher to buy the entire front list for us for purchase, for either locally hosting or dual access. They're also going to take a look at other publishers for whom maybe we're only buying a couple titles or just a small percent. And we're going to set up a patron-driven plan for those where we get the records, we put them in our catalog, and if there is use, we will then buy them. We might also do a combination of those 2 plans. Here's an example of our last package that we were able to negotiate. It was with Wiley. We purchased 3 years of the front list, 2011 to 13, about 2,800 titles at the cost of around $500,000 a year, and so each library contributes to that. I want to say up front, there's no textbooks in there. I think that's, after I was trying to talk to some Brazilian librarians, and Paula, Karina, I don't know if you're here, but thank you for chatting with me on Twitter. Paula gave me some insight on the kind of ebooks you have and what your users are looking for. I think one of our big differences is we generally don't buy textbooks for our students. So when any Brazilian students come to study in the US, they are so frustrated with us because we have no textbooks for them in print or electronic. It's probably the biggest complaint we get from our international students is lack of textbook content. So with this, with our patron-driven model, here's what we're estimating for OhioLink purchasing. We're estimating a multiplier of 5, and let me explain that. We're trying to negotiate with publishers for unlimited access for our entire consortia. We will pay a multiplier of 5. Some publishers want 10, some publishers want 80, but you have to negotiate. And what that means is, again, if the book is $100 US, we'll pay 5 times that price. So we'll pay $500 to that publisher for that book to have unlimited use across the state. We're looking at our purchase history. We have a shared catalog with our group, so we know how many titles from each publisher that we've historically purchased, and we're using that data to negotiate a multiplier. By the time you do all the number crunching as far as who puts in the money and how many books you're going to get and how much of a multiplier you've negotiated, we're estimating that we'll have about 2,200 titles a year through patron-driven, and at a cost of around $400 per title if you take the average book cost, $80 times the multiplier of 5. So we're looking at our largest institutions paying about $14 per title. Now publishers in the room are probably screaming because they're thinking of all the lost revenue there, but it's a good thing for our consortia if we can make it happen. As I said, some publishers won't play. So open access is hugely growing all over the world, and traditionally it's been for journals, but now we're seeing a bigger rise, a bigger concentration of it with electronic books, which is also good to hear. Wanted to share 4 examples of things that I'm aware of. 2 of them are in Europe, the OAPEN and the Directory of Open Access Books. Unglueit, and then another Knowledge Unlatched, which is not yet brought to fruition. It's an idea, and they're going to pilot it. Let me go through each of these examples just to show you the kind of things that are out there, kind of ebooks that are out there in open access. The OAPEN, the Open Access Publishing and European Networks, they focus on the humanities and social sciences. They only offer peer-reviewed monographs. When you go to this site, which all of you can go to, you can link to it on your library page. You can search, keyword search the full text of all of the titles that are in this collection. You are free then to read them. You are free to share them. Your users are free to read and share them and download them, etc. One thing I want to point out is metadata is also available to you. So you can go to this site and choose to download the metadata for all of these titles in a variety of different formats, and then you can upload that metadata to your catalog, immediately expanding your ebook collection by however many titles are available open access here. There are foreign language materials here, not just English. I tried to search for Portuguese language, and I did find some, but on their site I found nowhere that they listed the full number of titles in there, nor did they list by language how many titles they had, but they do have other languages, which is important. This organization also launched back in April the Directory of Open Access Books. The primary reason for launching this project was to increase the discoverability of open access books. This directory has over 1,200 open access titles available from 33 different publishers. Many of the publishers are US based, but there are many that aren't. There are a lot of European ones there. They will allow you to only search the description. So you can, when you keyword search in the directory, you're not searching the full text. You're only searching the metadata that's available. And when you do find a title that you might like, it's not housed here. This is just a directory. You'll be then sent to the publisher site where you can read the title and download the title. But the books are free to share. Again, you may get metadata from this collection. You may upload that metadata to your discovery tool, to your online catalog, so that your users can find it. You can also just add links to these on your library website. We would put them, at my library I have a guide about ebooks, and then I list all of the places where I have ebooks, so these sites are listed. You could also put them in your list of databases, if you chose, or a variety of other places I'm sure that you can think of. Another project that has launched this year was back in May when it actually went live. Is called unglue.it, Unglue It. And this is a project by a colleague of mine. His name's Eric Hellman. And Eric has a long history in libraries and technology and publishing and all of that. He owned his own company for a while. And when he sold his company, he said, the next project I'm going to do is going to be something that supports libraries. And so this is what he started, was Unglue It. He's trying to promote open access books. So what he's doing is he's reaching out to authors or anyone else that might own the rights to content, to a monograph of some sort. And he's negotiating with them what price, what amount would I have to pay you in order for you to republish that book in open access. So let's take my book, for example. I have no shelf required. I don't own the rights on it, but let's pretend I did. Okay, so here's my book, and I own the rights, and Eric would come to me and say, Sue, will you put no shelf required out on the open web, open access? And I said, well, yeah, but I might like to get a little compensation for it. And he says, name your price. So I might say $500, I might say $1,000, I might say $15,000. I may be so bold as to say $1 million, which I never would. So once that price is negotiated, then he puts the book out for crowdsourced funding, crowdfunding, he calls it. And anybody in the world can come to his site and make a donation. You can pledge $1, you can pledge $5, you can pledge $100 to free this book, to make it open access. Once that goal has been reached, once that author has received their funds, then the book becomes available open access. He sends the file and it's loaded at the Internet Archive, and then it's free for anybody to use. It launched in May. They have about 5 or 6 titles that are in the pledging stage. One title has been successful, and just last week that title was loaded to the Internet Archive site, and it's now available. So they have had their first success. It is going to be a long uphill road for them, but it's an opportunity. I wanted to make you aware of it in case it's something you might want to look into. Perhaps you know people that own the rights to content and would like to do something with it, and this is an opportunity for them. It's an opportunity for you to perhaps use your collection funds to help free some of these books. Eric wrote a chapter for me in one of my publications, Library Technology Reports. He wrote that, it was November, December of last year that it was published. So he wrote a chapter in there, and he talks a lot about open access and Creative Commons licensing. Knowledge Unlatched is the one that's an idea, and I think it's a really neat idea. It was developed by Dr. Frances Pinter, who was a longtime publisher with Bloomsbury, and she has now kind of started her own thing and, you know, does a variety of projects, but she has this great idea about creating a global library consortia. Most academic monographs, particularly university press type titles, are sold to libraries. So she's saying, how can we take the money that you're already investing and use it differently to make the content open access versus closed, you know, only in your library in print or via ebook? So she's proposing the creation of this global library consortia where you may become a member and you may choose to buy books through the consortia. What she's trying to do is get enough money together to pay the publishers for any fixed cost needed to develop that book. Again, it's, you know, it's like the basic amount. She calls it cost of first copy. What is it going to cost for that publisher to create this book? Let me get them their money back. Then the book is distributed with open access Creative Commons licensing, available on a website yet to be determined for anybody in the world to access, all funded through libraries. She hopes to pilot the project in 2013. You can get more information on her site there. I want to point out something else that she described with the project. She made an analogy with ice cream. She said, the plain vanilla ice cream will be available as open access. That's what libraries could potentially help fund. Then the publisher still has the right to take that plain vanilla ice cream and sell it to anybody else who wants it, perhaps with toppings. Maybe they want a fancy cone, or they want hot fudge, or they want whipped cream, or they want a cherry. And each of those items then would cost a different amount of money and to sell directly to the end user. And perhaps those are print. Perhaps it's a color print. Perhaps it's a PDF. Perhaps it's an audio file. There are vendors that are using that model successfully in the US. One of them is called Flat World Knowledge, where they're a textbook company and they offer their textbooks plain vanilla online for free. Any student can go and read the HTML. But if you want anything fancier, you have to pay for it, but it's a small amount. She's estimating that if, you know, she has a certain amount of global members in this, that libraries could potentially spend, you know, maybe $10, $15, $20 for a title versus, you know, the full price, which might be $50, $60, $80, something like that. So I'm anxious to see how her pilot goes. I did an audio interview with Frances a couple years ago when she first came out with this project, so you can listen to our interview on my blog, No Shelf Required. There is a regional initiative here in Brazil that I wanted to make sure that you're aware of, and it's the ELO science ebooks, and Nicholas here helped bring this one. It was to fruition. It was launched back in March. There are about 200 open access ebooks. It's run very similarly to the open access journals that you have through this organization as well. So go and take a look. You can get the ebooks in PDF and in EPUB, so you can download them, your patrons can download them, and they're all open access. And can we add records to our catalog? No, not yet. No? Oh, so put a link to it and talk to Nicholas about getting MARC records. Another initiative that's, you know, open access based that's really starting to pick up interest in the US are open educational resources. And this is essentially textbook type content that is available on the open web. And we like this because it's free, and we like it because we can reuse it, we can redistribute it, we can revise it, and we can remix it. We can take the content and change it all around and reproduce it. We can grab pieces, parts of textbooks that we like, put them together as our own textbook. All of the material is under the Creative Commons licensing. It's all open access, available to be openly used at no cost. I think I've just told you all of these wonderful things about why this is a good thing. A couple other things. Because they're electronic, many people add videos, add audio, add other quizzes, assessment pieces, so it really can help with educating people that may have different learning styles if they need to listen while reading or something. As I said, you can take, instead of having a huge textbook, you can just take a piece of it. I like this unit and I like that unit, and you can break it into smaller parts or create your own textbook with it. You could also localize your content. If you created an open, or an OER is how we call them. If you created an OER here in Brazil, you could call it what you wanted. You could put content that specifically related to your community, to your geographic location, to everything related to just you. And so other people can go in and customize it how they want. These are very time-consuming, however. You need a lot of buy-in from faculty, from administrators to adopt these. There are faculty in the US that are adopting OERs. There are plenty of faculty that are producing materials that are distributed through the OERs. People often question the quality of the content, and so they're building in peer review systems. But not everything's available. You're not going to find every topic available on one of these. This is just a sampling of some of the sites that are available. MIT, very well-known school in the US, Connections, Merlot, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of these that are thriving for higher education. And also our K-12 schools are really getting into this. The elementary and high schools are really starting to adopt these as well. In fact, several of our states have mandates that all textbook materials must be free by a certain date. So I think we're going to see more adoption of these. So is there a role for you as librarians in open access? Yes, as long as you're open to participating in a digital future, you can educate faculty about their options for publishing with open access, with Creative Commons. As I said earlier, you could potentially use your collection funds to support various open access initiatives. That is what we will be doing at my university, at Wright State University. We are setting aside a chunk of money to support open access fees that faculty have to pay. And it's because we want to do that. You could become a member of this Global Library Consortia that Francis has. And as I said earlier, again, you can add your open access material, the metadata, to your discovery tools. The last thing I wanted to talk about then is self-publishing, which has been on the rise. There are a number of self-publishing companies out there. Any of you can become an author in a matter of minutes. However long it takes you to write that content, you can upload it to one of these services just like that. You can make it available for free. You can make it available for a small price, a big price. You're not all going to be suddenly worldwide known authors, but you may be able to get an audience that way. Kelly Gallagher at Bowker, they take a lot of surveys about publishing, data, etc. She called it the golden age of self-publishing. In 2010, about 130,000 titles were self-published. That jumped to 211,000 titles within 1 year because of just the number of services that are out there. It's primarily fiction material, and the study showed that ebooks were 41% of those self-published titles, but only 11% of the sales, and that's because they're sold much cheaper than the print editions. The average cost of a self-published ebook was about $3. This chart shows on the left side traditional publishing by all the publishers that we know very well. It's been relatively stable there at around 300 and some thousand titles for the last 6-7 years. On the right side, excuse me, it shows self-publishing, and you see this huge spike, just an enormous spike in 2010. And again, that was due to all of these services becoming available. And think about the number of people that are perhaps turned away from traditional publishers and want an outlet. This is their outlet now. That spike has since come down. I think it was very unsustainable to be that high, but it's still relatively high. So we have a number of titles that are being self-published. And the question I ask a lot is, as libraries, how do we find these? How do we review them? Should we be reviewing them? Who's going to review them? Where are they going to review them? How do we buy them? If I'm self-publishing with Kindle or if I'm self-publishing with Apple, how do I buy those titles and make them available at my library? It's going to be very, very difficult, and these are challenges that we will face ahead if this continues and if more academics start taking advantage of this. You know, how will we access these into the future? So a lot of unanswered questions here about self-published titles. Academics are self-publishing. This is an example of a librarian, Brian Matthews is his name. He blogs at the Ubiquitous Librarian. He wrote a white paper, a book, whatever you'd like to call it, about how libraries can reinvent themselves and be more entrepreneurial. He put it on his institutional repository, had over 10,000 views in just a couple of weeks. Libraries are also looking at becoming publishers. This is really gaining popularity in the US. Many of us are using our funds to create open access journals and books. We're establishing institutional repositories. We're working directly with content creators to say, will you put your content on our site? We'll make it available globally at no charge. We're offering training, we're offering support for people that want to self-publish. This is really a movement in public libraries right now. They call it the maker movement. They're trying to encourage people to come to the library, collaborate with one another to be able to publish and produce any kind of content, not just print, not just reading, any videos, audio, etc. A study at Purdue University back in March of 2012 looked at 43 of the top university libraries in the US. They found that 55% of them already have or are interested in starting their own self-publishing at their university. 90% of them decided to do this because they wanted to contribute to a change in the scholarly publishing system. So there's a lot of issues that come with buying ebooks, from owning to accessing to ongoing access, dealing with self-published works, buying as a group, all kinds of things. And good luck. Hold on. It's moving fast. Things change at a very rapid pace. But we're in a period of experimentation, which is good, because that means you have opportunities. And I would say my best advice is be open to experimentation, talk to your vendors, establish good relationships, see what it is that you can do that's best for your library, that pleases everyone. But bottom line, what is going to help your users? Because they're the most important part of this whole thing. How can we make the content available to them? I have a number of blogs that I follow to keep up with this ever-changing whatever you want to call it, phenomena, this ever-changing thing, this ever-changing business. And they're listed here, and I can get you these slides later. I see a lot of you taking pictures, and thank you for that, but I'll be glad to pass these on. These are sites that I go to keep up, and they're quite helpful. I also post quite a bit on my own blog, No Shelf Required, and I do audio interviews, as I said, with a variety of publishers, vendors, and I have them available. They're all in English, and I'll tell you a quick funny story that I interviewed the gentleman at 3M, and they sell public libraries, fiction books, and he came up to me at a conference and he said, Sue, I met a man in Portugal who said he's learning English by listening to your interviews. So I was quite pleased. I said, boy, can you put them up in Portuguese so I can learn them too? My 3 publications, which you should be able to find through a variety of US libraries, you can borrow them. Many of them, you'll find the first couple of chapters for free on Google Books, or the American Library Association, who these are all published with. They have a Scribd site, S-C-R-I-B-D, Scribd, and they put many of the chapters out there as well, so you can hopefully find a lot of that content. And I'm happy now to take any questions that you might have. Thank you. Or obrigada.
Muito obrigada, professora. Agora nós vamos passar para as perguntas e eu vou me valer da condição de coordenadora. E eu vou me valer da condição de coordenadora da mesa para fazer a primeira pergunta. O preço dos livros eletrônicos no Brasil ainda é muito alto. Eu acho que, além do problema do costume, da falta de hábito ainda da leitura de livros eletrônicos, nós ainda enfrentamos um problema de preço. A diferença entre o livro impresso e o livro eletrônico no Brasil ainda é muito pequena. Então, creio que esse também é um dos fatores que nos impede de ter uma disseminação do livro eletrônico no Brasil. Houve algum movimento? Essa diferença de preços nos Estados Unidos, ela é efetivamente muito grande? Ou houve algum movimento junto às editoras para que esse preço viesse a cair?
I've found that years ago, when we first started buying the ebooks, that they might have been 2, 3, 4 times higher, price than print. Sometimes just a percentage. Some of the publishers that we're working with now, the price is coming down. Some publishers will sell us ebooks at the same cost as print, or perhaps 10 or 20% higher. So through just ongoing negotiations, I think our market is obviously more established, with more of us, 95% of us buying. They're seeing that it's catching on, and some of the models are working. So again, I would go back to that: build relationships, experiment, group purchase, which might get you cheaper costs. But yes, it can be very staggering. And our public libraries experience this quite a bit. 2 of the major publishers for U.S. fiction materials have increased their prices for libraries by over 200%. So a book that will sell for $10 on Amazon, a library will have to buy for hundreds of dollars, and they're really feeling it, and many are just stopping. They're just not buying from these publishers. But luckily, the academic market is not that extreme, again, because many of the people that we buy from, we're the primary buyers.
Bom, as perguntas estão abertas. Elas podem ser feitas por escrito ou...
Bom dia. Bom dia. Meu nome é Liliana Serra. Nós conversamos brevemente no Congresso da ALA. A minha pergunta é: eu queria saber se já existe alguma experiência nas bibliotecas americanas sobre o uso do social DRM, ou se o exemplo que foi feito no site Pottermore pode ser aplicado para bibliotecas, para controle do acesso que pertence à biblioteca.
No, I don't know that I missed. What was the site you mentioned?
Pottermore. As publicações do Harry Potter, que eles usaram uma técnica de social DRM.
I've heard of it for Pottermore. I'm not seeing too much of that with the academic publishers yet. I was telling Nicholas yesterday, I spoke to an academic publisher recently who was going to start using the watermarking for DRM, and I cannot remember who it was. So I think it might be something that develops, but not just yet. Publishers are very attached to their DRM for very valid reasons. Não para ser usado pelos editores. Eu penso isso para ser usado pelas bibliotecas para fazer a gestão do seu próprio conteúdo.
qual a possibilidade que a senhora enxerga de usar essa tecnologia para as bibliotecas?
Most of our libraries that are managing their own content, it's open access or it's free, so we're not putting, DRM on it. So I don't know that I have an answer for you, unfortunately, because we don't own the rights to content that might be that might need the DRM.
Próxima.
Okay. First of all, thank you for your speech. I'm here. Thank you for your speech. It was very helpful. And my name is Regiane. I'm from State University of Campinas.
English, please. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Okay, I start again. First of all, congratulations for your speech. It was very helpful. My name is Regiane. I'm from State University of Campinas. And we have a work group there which has a big challenge. We need to create an e-book collection for undergrad students, which means test books. But it has been very hard for us. So I would like to know if you have some experience in this way to share with us about e-book collection in electronic format. Thank you.
As I said earlier, we don't generally buy textbooks, and I find that when we negotiate with publishers for front list collections, textbooks are often excluded. There are publishers that will sell the textbooks. Elsevier recently sent us a package of probably 80 different textbooks, and it had a pretty reasonable cost to it, and so we looked to see how many of those textbooks had been adopted by our faculty, and it just wasn't enough to make it useful. One of the biggest challenges we run into is if we accidentally buy a textbook from a publisher and the business model we used was one user at a time, and boy does that frustrate users. So I would say really, before you think about doing that, make sure you communicate with your faculty to find out what books they would like in electronic form for their classes, to make sure you can negotiate the right business model so that the entire class has access, and you will pay for that. You will pay a lot for that. So what university libraries are starting to do is be more active outside of the library on their campus to work with the bookstore or to work with other units on the campus that might be involved with textbook purchasing. And they're trying to help them with licensing electronic content for the entire school, but still having students pay a textbook fee. And this would be very, very different. This is a complete change in how we do things. But it's a growing issue. I mean, our textbook prices are rising at twice the rate of inflation. We know it's a problem. And as I said earlier, many states have mandates about digital textbooks and controlled pricing. So I think we'll start to see a lot more of this happening where the students pay a textbook fee and the library negotiates with the publishers to license it electronically. And then perhaps they have that option for the student to buy a print copy at a lower rate.
Agradeço muitíssimo as respostas da professora. Infelizmente, nós não temos mais tempo por questões organizacionais. Nós faremos agora um coffee break de 20 minutos. 20 minutos significam 20 minutos e não 25 ou 30. Ok? Agradecemos muitíssimo a professora por ter dividido a sua experiência e conhecimentos a respeito do tema. Sugiro que os interessados a procurem no coffee break e em outras oportunidades, que aproveitem a presença dela aqui no evento. Bom, 20 minutos e depois nós retornamos para falar de periódicos eletrônicos. Conto com a presença de vocês dentro de 20 minutos.
Nossos agradecimentos a Su Polanca, Bianca Amaro e Rosa Maria Vivona Bertolini Oliveira por suas participações e, como bem lembrou a coordenadora, retornaremos em 20 minutos para a continuidade dos trabalhos.